Can the Mariners extend Cal Raleigh this offseason? Joe and I are going to talk about what it's going to take for the team to extend their star catcher, how much money we think it'll cost, how long we do it for, and if Cal Raleigh would even sign here. And then we're going to take a look at one of the trade ideas that you guys sent in over on our Twitter. Two trade ideas. We're going to break down both of them and if we think they're possible, and maybe some tweaks to them as well. Thank you guys so much for watching episode 133 of the Hit It Here podcast, part of the Bleav Network, available on all your favorite podcasting platforms. Be sure to give us a 5-star review, like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. And this is the Blender episode of the podcast, and I'm here with Joe. Joe, how you doing?
I'm feeling good, right? We've got 2 days, I guess 1 day that you guys are hearing us from the World Series. So the big bang, the final culmination of the 2024 regular season will come to a close soon, and then the offseason can actually get rolling. Like, we'll actually have kind of like tangible like articles, like rumors, etc. to like really kind of like sink our teeth into, instead of like trying to piece together what to do in the month of October. You know what I mean? Like, we're so down bad, Colton, that we're making guest appearances. Right? we went on Jake's channel, did the Mariners Roundtable, and then the Marine Layer guys reached out to us, and we're like, all right, fine, I guess. Well, it's a joke. We love doing things with like everyone around the community. It's just a joke. But Marine Layer, Lyle and TJ, they asked us a question during our little interview with them. So appreciate to them for having us on. Go check that out if you guys have not already. But one of the questions was about Cal Raleigh and whether or not the Mariners should extend him. And I think that like the realistic answer, Colton, is just like yes, but like it's always going to be a yes and that yes and does get a little confusing. However, Cal Raleigh had what, a top 1 catcher season in Mariners history in 2024, should receive MVP votes for his performances in 2024. I don't know if you can select like where guys fall or how many MVP votes guys get in like betting platforms, but if BetOnline can help you guys out figuring out where you can place those kind of bets, that's the place to do it. So go place some bets with BetOnline. To BetOnline for being a sponsor for the Hit It Here podcast. Postseason baseball, but most importantly, the NFL regular season is here, and BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. And if you think that you know your stuff, get in on the $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000. Head to the website today to get in on the action, and remember, BetOnline, the game starts here. So as I stated, Cal Raleigh's 2024 season, it's one for the record books, especially when you're looking at the Mariners kind of franchise leader, whatever. A 5.4 F4 for Cal Raleigh in 2024. Good for 14th in all of baseball according to Position Player WAR. Tied with William Contreras, also a 5.4 for best catching season in 2024. If there's like the all MLB votes teams, whatever, Cal Raleigh's getting votes there. And the Mariners, sure, we know how operating costs and payroll and et cetera, how that's all looking. It's his first year entering arbitration. It's going to get projected what, like 6 million? Was it 5 million? 6 million? Somewhere in that range.
5.4 maybe.
Somewhere in that range. The sign, they're aligning. Regardless, it's his first year entering arbitration. It's the first time the Mariners have to owe him real money. But it's a guy that has been such a popular player from a fan base perspective, from I think like a team perspective as well, of like what he's given to them on the field. Sure, he's had some media sessions or media moments where maybe the front office and ownership group hasn't been overly pleased with Cal Raleigh. But I think there's not a single fan out there, and there's probably maybe not a single one, there's a couple out there that probably wouldn't want to extend him for purposes of how much he's really caught in the yes.
We had that fan who was in our comments every single day saying the Mariners pitching staff would be better if Cal Raleigh would stop pulling his pitches and whatnot.
Oh, that is
true.
That
guy probably doesn't want to extend him.
I do remember that. I repressed that because that was such a long time ago.
Yeah, and that guy's stupid. So
long story short, extend Cal Raleigh. There are some like legitimate concerns. How often he's caught, like how much his body will continue to wear down, and if you extend him, like will he really be worth that money long term? And on Marine Layer show, I said I would go anywhere up to $18 million for an annual average. And I said about 5 years. So that would put him at his like age, like 33, 34 season. And you're paying him $18 million over 5 years, $90 million contract. I think that's very, very reasonable. The issue is I don't know if that really is like what his worth is because of how good of a catcher he has been. It's like this weird, we're in a state of limbo with Cal Raleigh and like what he's worth. Where are you at with how much you'd want to sign Cal to for an extension?
No, I think you're right on the money there with that. There was one thing that you brought up specifically in this interview with Lyle and TJ that I found pretty interesting because we all know Cal Raleigh's days as a catcher, one of the best in baseball, very clearly, defensively, offensively, all the way around. But for how many times he has had to catch over the past 2-3 years, it's going to catch up to him. So when we were discussing this, we were talking about how maybe you front load like an extension for him, where you pay him, let's say 21, 22 at the beginning for like the first 3 years, and maybe the next three you pay him like 15 or whatever, because at that point he might be a first baseman, a DH, like who knows. And we've seen just all the injuries and the nicks to his armor, if you will, that Cal Raleigh has had to sustain over the past couple of years. He hit a walk-off home run to send one of the most important moments in Mariners history with like half a thumb. Like the dude is an absolute warrior. I think that if as long as his legs will let him, he will catch. Or until basically the Mariners say, "Hey man, you're costing us wins because you're just so bad defensively now." I don't see that. I mean, we're still ways away from that, so I don't think it's anything to worry about right now. But when it comes to talking about an extension, it's something that is very interesting. We talked a little bit about certain players throughout history, more so recently, catchers that have switched over to first base. One that I brought up was Matt Wieters, a guy who was also a switch hitting catcher. He's a guy that caught for the Orioles for a very long time. And I don't necessarily know if he's a good comp for Cal Raleigh. He was a guy that just made a lot of sense for the Orioles back in the day. He had signed a 2-year, $21 million contract with the Washington Nationals afterwards. So I don't necessarily know if that's something that they'd look at. But he signed in 2016, he accepted, I think looks like he accepted the qualifying offer at 15.8. Did he never sign an extension? I guess he didn't.
I'm not fully sure like if like how Matt Wieters' career breaks down. I think like from a player perspective, like a player like archetype breaking it down, like a switch hitting catcher who is good defensively, is with a singular team for a long time. I think it does make sense. I do know that I think injuries were a bit more of a problem for Wieters throughout his career. And yes, we maybe haven't seen that for Cal Raleigh, knock on wood, but like looking at Wieters' career, like an OPS plus on his career of 93. He had some years where he was above league average, but he never like I think came into his own as much as maybe the Orioles had wanted or needed him to. Offensively, he was always a great defensive guy, but the innings that he did catch in Baltimore definitely did catch up to him by the end of his career when he was in Washington and St. Louis.
Yeah, I mean, he was playing in 130 plus games a year from 2010 through 2013. Like that kind of sounds like Cal.
Mm-hmm.
Another guy that I think makes some sense there is Salvador Perez. Now, Salvador Perez is one of the best catchers of all time. Like, so it's kind of hard to compare the two right now. But Salvi's seen a lot of time at first base and DH over the years. Basically now, for the most part, just a DH. And Salvi's like younger than you think he would be. Like when I think about Salvador Perez, I feel like he has been around forever. He's been around for 13 years. Salvi is he's only 34.
Yeah,
Like he's not that
season.
old.
Yeah.
And so it's like you look at Salvador Perez, and I think like that could be the path for someone like Cal Raleigh to eventually, especially and with Harry Ford coming up in the next couple of years, maybe that's what they decide to do. It'll be good to have a second, like a backup catcher that makes sense for the Mariners, where they don't have to play Cal and have him catch 125 games a year, because that's just not sustainable. And so having like Harry Ford come up, he can catch a little bit more. Cal can maybe move into a DH or first base role, and then you're looking. Obviously, he's worth more to you as a catcher. We talked about this with Lyle and TJ. He's worth a hell of a lot more as a catcher because of how he catches the staff and just the fact that you have that offense behind the plate. But at the same time, if you can keep his bat in the lineup and maybe even increase his offensive numbers by moving him to first base or DH, lets his legs start to give out a little bit more, I think it makes a lot of sense. So to answer the question you asked 5 hours ago, when we started this podcast, I think that it makes sense to front load a contract for him. However, based on some new information that came to light, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to record this part of the podcast after talking to Lyle and TJ, it feels like maybe we're a little bit low on that. Joe, tell me about what you learned about Cal Raleigh.
So as like the offseason begins to kind of get into full swing, and even like certain accounts on Twitter start to like detail like market value like stats for Juan Soto. I think Juan Soto's market value contract was posted, I think, within the last 2 days. 14 years, like 540 some odd $1 million, regardless, right? So that got me thinking, like, wait, we just talked about Cal and an extension. What is Cal's market value? And I will say that he is the number one ranked catcher, according to Spotrac, as far as calculated market value, as like what he should be owed. 38 in all of MLB. They have him evaluated at $24.2 million annual average, and that's with an 8-year contract as well. I really don't think 8 years is the number. I'd probably go as high as 7. Sure, it's only 1 more year, but that's like the peak of, like, that's as far as I would go for Cal Raleigh. I would go 7 years, and that can expand the money, obviously making him over $100 million easily in that contract with Seattle. But the fact that what we kind of said, like, because I think TJ started it at like 15 in our conversation. I was like, yeah, I could see like anywhere between like 15 and I'd go as high as to 18. And the fact that we're still 6 million below what this like calculated market value is kind of crazy. The fact that it's at 24.2, like that's a lot of money. And I don't know if that's necessarily 100% accurate given how quickly he could break down, given how little, I guess, catching help he's given behind him. I'm very much so worried about the innings catching up to him. He's not nearly on the same level as Salvi, where Salvi's caught 10,000 innings over 13 years and just made the switch to being part-time first base in 2023, essentially. I don't think he's there quite yet, but I would be if we did sign, say, like a 7 or 8 year deal. By like the 5th year, you're looking at like, okay, how is this really going to hold up? So if we're low on the money, I just hope Cal's not looking at Spotrac. Let's just put it that way, because 24.2 million is, if that's what he gets, say like in an open market kind of situation, like, but the hard part is he's not a free agent until 2028. Like he's got 4 more seasons technically, 2025, 2026, 2027, and then 3 more seasons. He's got 3 more seasons to put up these numbers to stay on that level. So it's like, will he still be performing at this rate in his age 30 season when he's going into free agency? It'll be tough to see. It's like kind of hard to predict that going forward. But I do agree that like it would make sense to try and get him now so you can try and buy out at least one or two of those free agency years and it not be worth $24 million. But like you kind of mentioned, front loading that contract, if you're paying him 24 in the first year, maybe that's like how the evaluation kind of translates, and then it back, like you front load it and it trickles down after that.
So let me tell you really quick about the history of Salvador Perez's contracts, because they're interesting. So in 2017, so this is a year there. This is Salvador Perez had been an all-star for the last 4 years, putting up a 105 OPS plus in 2013, but then below league average 2014, 15, 16. Signed a 5-year, $52.5 million extension in 2017, which obviously then, extended for a couple of years. So that was about a $10.5 million AAV. A little bit older.
7 years ago, though.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so definitely the money's a little bit different there. Most recently, Salvador Perez in 2022, he was extended for 4 years, $82 million. So $22 million a year with a club option for a 5th year at the end for like 13.5 or something like that.
Okay.
That feels about right. Like, I feel like that, you look at the 22 AAV, I could see that happening. Obviously, this is after, so 2022, if you look at 2021, Salvador Perez was MVP 7, hit 273, 316, 544 with a 128 OPS plus. He hit 48 home runs that year with 121 RBI. Like, incredible. But that extension has played out really well so far for the Royals. I mean, he has been, 20 to 30 home runs every single year, hitting 250 to 270 every year. Like, that's a fantastic catcher.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously less catching in that time frame, but I think that somewhere in the middle of those two contracts that we look at right now, so whether that be the 10.5 or the 22, makes sense for Cal Raleigh moving forward, especially if it's, for 6-7 years instead of the 4 that he's getting this year, or then his last extension at age 32. I think that there's a fine line into where it does become too much. Like, I think 24 million is too much.
Yeah.
Personally. Like, so you could get me to pay 20 a year. Like, I could sign Cal Raleigh to a 5-year, $100 million deal, and I'd be fine with that if they did that right now.
Okay.
But as you start getting to 24, 25, it's like, like, can you defer it? Maybe. And you talk about it. Maybe does he even want to sign an extension here? Who knows? So it's a tough question to ask. Thankfully, we're not right up against it, or it's something we have to know right this very second. But it's just an interesting question that TJ did pose to us. We asked for your guys' trade ideas on Twitter, and by we, I mean me specifically.
It was all Colton.
I didn't even tell him I was doing it. Yeah, I just did it. I just typed it out. I was like,
And he changed our pinned tweet. Got rid of us slandering Astros fans. Mm-hmm. Guess Colton doesn't like to see it when the Astros lose. Apparently,
I love to.
Colton's a closeted Astros fan. You heard it here first.
No comment. So this is a couple of trade ideas from Stoic M fans at Ian Houben. Wait, H-O-U?
Houston. Oh my God.
The first one here is Jake Berger in exchange for Brock Rodden, Peyton Alford, and Dominic Canzone. Jake Berger, first baseman, third baseman from Miami Marlins. Brock Rodden is number, I think, 22 for the Mariners in their prospect system.
Yep.
I don't know. Is Peyton Alford ranked?
He is not ranked, but is the guy like similarly in conversations, not as highly like evaluated as like Curvelo going into next year, but a guy that people are like, oh, this could be like something going forward for the Mariners. Like him, Travis Kuhn, and like Curvelo all, I think, have an opportunity to potentially pitch for the Mariners in 2025 should the opportunity arise. And of course, the last one there, Dom Canzone, feels like like the fifth outfielder, odd man out. You could probably get similar level of production from Cade Marlowe or a Rylan Thomas in that role of like how many at-bats Dom would get for the 2025 Seattle Mariners. So it does seem like he will be traded, in my opinion, this offseason. It just like kind of makes sense, like a piece to kind of move on from. But Jake Berger, Colton, he is as big of a liability defensively as you can get, I would say. Like he's rough.
Yep.
A -6 outs above average. That is mainly at first base, but like kind of splitting time with third base as well. Had a -5 defensive run saves according to Baseball Reference at third base in 2024. You're not acquiring Jake Berger for his defense though. You're acquiring him to be a perennial 250 hitter with anywhere between like 25 to 30 bombs. Of course, 2022 is a bit of an outlier because he hadn't really like burst onto the scene yet, but in 2023 he had a big breakout with the White Sox, got traded to the Marlins, and then last year, again, a 250 average, a 301 OBP, a 460 slugging with a 761 OPS, and popped 29 homers for a very putrid Marlins offense. OPS plus, it's not like anything crazy. It's not going to blow you out of the water. It's 103 from last year, whereas from 2023, it was 115, above league average. But there are like the hesitations, I think, defensively. The good thing is, Colton, he hasn't even reached arbitration yet. You would have Jake Berger until 2029 to be first base / DH for you, essentially.
He's a guy who is going to hit the ball hard. He's going to strike out a lot, and he probably should just be a DH. All of his power is pull side power, and honestly, most of his hits are all pull side too. When you look at his spray chart on Baseball Savant, it's actually pretty crazy. Some things to note here, like when you talk about average exit velocity, 84th percentile, hard hit percentage, 81st, range, outs above average was in the 8th percentile with that -6. Arm strength, 48th percentile. Like, dude is not like, if you don't catch this man on the diamond at all, for the love of God. He's a guy that I think does make a lot of sense for the Mariners. However, hold on, is this true? Did he hit 250 every year?
Yep, that's why I said perennial 250 hitter. because it's every year.
You weren't kidding. You were like,
he
it's
is
like
the next Chris Davis, who will hit 247 every year. Jake Berger will hit 250 every year of his career until he dies.
You weren't kidding. You were completely serious.
I was
when you
dead
said
serious.
That. That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, struck out 150 times in 2024. The package itself is interesting. From Stoic M's fan here, Brock Rodden, like,
it's not moving the needle. Like, that's your highest
Right.
rated prospect that you're giving to a Marlins team that is clearly rebuilding, retooling in some capacity. We know that they probably don't need pitching. Like, that's what the Marlins organization has been known for, is they've got a plethora of pitching that, one, does get kind of hurt, but it's also like maybe their clock's ticking right now. So I honestly think doing a pitcher in this trade could make sense, but you'd have to go higher than your 22nd ranked prospect when you're getting a guy that is going to be club controlled for the next 5 years. Yes, you're giving up a lot of control for a pretty close to major league guy in Dom Canzone as well, which feels like a perfect fit for a team at the bottom of the league that just needs a guy to go out there and play innings. Like, Dom Canzone makes a lot of sense in that regard, but I think you have to up the stakes from Brock Rodden and maybe even Peyton Alford as well. I think you can kind of switch out like the roles though. Like, you take the Brock Rodden position of the prospect and you up it into, say, like a Jeter Martinez, a pitcher that's quite a ways away, gives them time to build him up. He's like, what, 17th ranked in the system? Something like that. You can go higher if you want to. I just don't know if Jake Berger's really worth it in that capacity. Like, what he gives you offensively, sure, but you have to kind of take it as like a full face package of like, he hit 29 homers, but only accumulated half a win, according to reference, in 2024. Like, it's just not great.
A lot of that does stem from his defense too.
Exactly.
He probably, like, how much of the WAR that took away.
Mm-hmm. So if you're only getting him as a DH, then sure, like, there's a bit of a different kind of like stipulation there. I don't know if I'd want to go as high as like a Michael Morales, or I feel like, would I be okay with parting with Brandon Garcia? I don't think the Marine Layer guys would be, but I wouldn't like hate it, but also at the same time, it's like, what else? How else could you like supplement this trade package to entice the Marlins without having to give up too much? And it's like, we're continuing to dance around like, oh, we don't want to, like, we want to protect the farm system, we don't want to give up too much stuff. It's like, to a certain point, we have to kind of like let things go, right? Like, I'm probably would be okay with going up to, say, Michael Morales and then swapping out that Peyton Alford spot for like someone that's still in the top 30. The issue is like, you run out of like position players. Like, I might do Morales and Brock Rodden, but that might be too much, like, for a lot of people. But what are Morales and Rodden really going to do for you long term?
I do have a thought on that, but I just want to mention here. So underneath his tweet, Stoic Mariners fan said, Rodden, an undersized spark plug utility player, and getting Dom out of T-Mobile. He was just playing with player profiles he thinks the organization's like. Maybe not what they'd want, but Berger is entering arbitration, which is true. Yeah, it's I don't necessarily know what he's going to be making, Jake Berger would, in like the next couple of years for arbitration. He doesn't strike me as a guy who's going to make a lot. But yeah, it's a fine fit, more so at DH. Like, if you get him as a DH, fine, but he should not be your answer at first or third base, in my opinion. And then, yeah, I do think that, like we said, the trade just needs a little bit more added to it. The players are fine, but for a guy who's not going to be a free agent for like 4 or 5 years, probably got to add a little bit more to it. The next one, a guy that we've watched quite a bit here over the last month or so, Josh Naylor. Obviously, the Guardians have now been knocked out of the playoffs. Very sad. But it is an exchange. So Josh Naylor will be coming over from the Guardians for Michael Morales, Jared Sundstrom, and Rylan Thomas. Joe, you talked a little about Michael Morales in this last trade. And then Jared Sundstrom is, what is he, single A? Double A? Where's he at?
He's in the Arizona Fall League, I can tell you that. I think last season he most recently played, I think he was in Everett for 2024, is projected to be in Arkansas for next year, I Bleav.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
So in Everett, he played the entire season, 112 games, put together a pretty solid year down there. Hit 263, 380, 434 with an 814 OPS. Like, he's 23. I think that's a very like fine, solid addition to a trade of like a top 30 prospect that, again, like a lot of these outfielders, unfortunately, the way that the Mariners have kind of pieced together the outfield for 2025 and even in 2026, and then once a Rosenreina's contract, like he reaches free agency, Robles is probably, I mean, he's got a 3-year contract, so like I think he's got one more year after that into 2027. But you're probably looking at some guys coming up through the farm system at the top end of your prospect list, like Lazaro Montes taking over for Randy Arozarena once he does reach free agency. Like Sundstrom doesn't really feel like he's got a spot here, even if he does start to ascend through the ranks. And Rylan Thomas at the end, there was a guy that we acquired from the Mets for Ryan Stanek, a contact first guy and the reason why Stoke M's fan put him in this trade to the Guardians is the fact that he is a contact oriented lefty with speed and defense, aka Stephen Kwan. Like maybe not to that same level, but like it's a guy, another situation like Dom Canzone, like a Cade Marlowe, a Zach DeLoach, like it's that 4th or 5th outfielder that like, will they get any run with the Mariners next year? It's hard to say. It's going to take, I think, them performing really well down in Tacoma, or knock on wood, some injuries to happen to the major league roster. Josh Naylor is someone that we've talked about a lot though, Colton. And we talked about it even last year. And I think the reason why it's probably coming to fruition again is the fact that he's going to be making projected $12 million in arbitration this upcoming, like through the offseason going to next year. And it's the last year of his contract. Like this is it. He's a free agent after this season. So I don't know if the Guardians take this trade as it stands because of how good Naylor really has been like the last 3 years. Sure, it's similar to Berger where it's a lot more offensive production compared to like what you're getting out of him defensively. But I'd say that this is your full-time first baseman if you get Josh Naylor, obviously. And that, I don't know if I like the fit as much, which is kind of like a weird thing to say because you have Luke Raley. So where does Luke Raley go? Or do you DH Naylor and you have Raley play first base? But then, like, who hits against lefties? Is it Naylor, who's maybe better on his career against left-handed pitching than Luke Raley is? Or are you fielding someone on your roster that just plays first base against lefties, like a Dylan Moore type again? Like, it's not the most perfect fit given how the roster, I think, is constructed right now, but I do understand where it's kind of coming from in principle.
Yeah, the hard part is like you could argue, Tyler Locklear could be that guy to play first base, but as we're going to talk about here in a minute, he's probably going back to the Guardians in this trade. Like I feel pretty strongly like that he would probably go back to the Guardians. And at the same time, do you really want to have 3 first basemen on your roster? Like that's Luke Raley can play the outfield, of course, but if you have Naylor and Locklear and Raley on your roster, it's 3 guys that are mainly all first basemen. One guy's going to DH, one guy's going to play first, and one guy is going to be a bench guy day in and day out. I think that Dylan Moore is the right-handed version there if you need him to be. But Josh Naylor, man, I mean, he just has always hit, or at least over the last 3 years. He hit 243, 320, 456 with a 776 OPS in 2024. Good for a 118 OPS. Plus, he hit 31 home runs with 108 RBI. He does not strike out very often at all. A career 16.6%. Throughout the entirety of his 8 years or so,
6 years, I think.
6 years, and a career average of a 7.7 walk percentage, about the same. Hard hit percentage at 41.2%, pretty solid, above league average for him there. You look at his baseball savant page, again, a lot of pull power for him, which definitely fits T-Mobile Park a little bit better than a guy like Jake Berger. It's all to the right. It's all to right field, which is where the ball flies at T-Mobile Park. And he does hit the ball the other way as well. And we know he also could just be a spark plug kind of guy. So I think that this does make a lot of sense for the Mariners for Josh Naylor. There is some caveats to it. The Mariners don't have a lot of money to play with this offseason. And if he's making $12 million, it's going to be that's going to take a big chunk out of their ability to make more moves. I don't hate it, but I do think there needs to be more done in what the Mariners are sending.
True. You mentioned Tyler Locklear. That to me feels like a very easy complementary addition to the Guardians roster in 2025 to allow Kyle Manzardo to be your strong side first base platoon with a guy like Tyler Locklear who is hit at every step of the way in the minor leagues and just hadn't really had the opportunity with the Mariners to get real run at first base in the major league level. So we both kind of agreed that the 2 front pieces here of Morales and Sundstrom, you swap out Morales for Locklear and you swap out Sundstrom for someone in the 15 to 20 range of the prospect rankings as well. It could be a pitcher if we think that the Guardians like value pitching in that way, or maybe we can go further down, like someone that's like pretty far away, like a DeWalt Joseph. Give them some sort of middle infielder for when maybe Andres Jimenez's contract is up, or if they move on from Jimenez in the coming years because he's getting really expensive as well. There's things to do, like to kind of like augment this trade to make it work. But I agree in the sense that if they were to acquire Josh Naylor, that money being spent, $12 million to upgrade first base, we've all kind of agreed throughout, like not just you and I, but other Mariners content creators, other people that talk about the Mariners a bunch, that spending the money on first base should not be like the ultimate priority. If you can upgrade second or third before first base, I'd say that they should go with that instead. I do like Josh Naylor. I just don't know if him being like the big move of the offseason, because he would be at $12 million, like what it would cost to like keep him. Like, it's just, that is the one big move that you're really looking for. And going into 2025, that just leaves, I think, too much of an opportunity for holes to be still had at second base and third base.
Which really sucks. Like, the fact that we have to worry about that just sucks. But
yeah,
such is the life when John Stanton is your owner. I think that it'd be interesting to see if the Guardians would be willing to give up Josh Naylor. Again, he's been such a big part of that team over recent years. I'd honestly be kind of shocked, like, if they were willing to trade him. I would assume that they try to extend him this offseason, especially with Bo Naylor there as well. Like, I mean, I know that, you know, they want Manzardo, obviously, to play, and he looks like a guy who's ready. But I think there's plenty of at-bats to go around in that infield if they want to try to get a little cute with it, whether it be DH, first base, what have you. So I'll be interested to see what the Guardians would want in a package like that. But yeah, thank you so much to Stoic M's fan for sending that in. Be sure to send it over on Twitter to us, guys, if you have other ideas for some trades, and we might just talk about it on one of our episodes. And that's going to do it for us from episode 133 of the Hit It Here podcast, presented by Bet Online, the Zabel Thomas episode of the podcast, and go Mariners.